Hi everyone, can everyone see and hear me okay? Hi, hello everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. I hope you can hear and see me okay, so just let me know in the comments and it means that we are ready to get started. Hey there. Just a quick sound and camera check. If you guys can hear me, please send a reaction or a plus to the chat. Amazing. Looks like you can hear us. Awesome. That's great news, and it means that we can get started. So, hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar Mastering Communication Nuances in the DACH region. Yes, this time we are diving into the finer points of communicating effectively in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And just take a look at our agenda real quick so you know the idea of what we are going to discuss today. It's not only me, but you can see Thomas as well. So just I'll introduce Thomas in a minute, but the agenda. We are going to learn more about the DACH region, just an overview, because it looks like not everyone knows about the DACH region, this term. So we are going to learn about that. Plus, we are going to discuss together with Thomas how Central Europe, specifically the DACH region, communicates, how they tend to give feedback, how they tend to resolve conflicts in the work setting, right, in the business setting. And then we'll wrap it up with some best practices, tips, and tricks of effective multicultural communication, which means that if you work in an international environment, if you are part of this environment at work or just like in real life, hopefully you'll find this session very useful. We are ready to get started, and let's go with the introduction first. My name is Julia Trypolska. I'm the CEO of English for IT, and English for IT is a US-based e-learning provider. We help individuals, also global teams and global companies improve their English and especially communication skills. So which means if you are an HR manager, L&D manager, executive, team lead, or the founder of the company, stay tuned because I think we have some pleasantries for you, some nice things for you to offer. And today with me is Thomas Kelly, is our special guest. Hi, Thomas. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, hi, and hopefully you can hear me as well, Julia.
Right, absolutely. So, hi, Thomas.
Yes.
Thomas is a human resource and recruiting professional, also a LinkedIn top voice, not to mention his experience at Google for 10 years, if I'm right. Thomas is also a coach of one of our courses at English for IT, Business Writing for Human Resources. Originally from Ireland, Thomas now is based in Switzerland, as you know, one of the countries in the DACH region. So, Thomas is here to spill the beans on how to communicate effectively in this unique cultural landscape, if I can say so. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Good. Are we ready to get started, or did I miss anything when introducing you?
No, that was a beautiful introduction, so happy to proceed here.
Awesome. Okay, let's get started. And of course, before we go into the agenda, let's get to know each other better. Please use the chat to participate, to answer the following questions, because it will help us, tailor the presentation, tailor our discussion today, communicate with you. We are happy to address some questions and comments today. So please answer the questions. What's your role? Which cultures do you and your team work with? And what is your goal for this webinar? Also, feel free to mention if you've ever attended any of the English for AT's webinars before, because we host them quite often, and it's interesting to see if we have some regulars or new people here in the chat. And while you're sharing your answers, let's maybe quickly go over some ground webinar rules, right? So the very first thing that we encourage you to do is to be active in the chat, as I mentioned, and contribute to the discussion. Also, please, no spam, irrelevant messages, or offensive language, otherwise we'll have to ban you forever. And finally, a special treat, as I promised, you have a chance to get the free 30-minute consultation with me on effective communication training for global teams. So again, if you manage a team, if you run a team, if you're responsible for learning and development processes in your company, feel free to scan the code and we can plan the consultation next week or this month. This is it. This is it. And finally, let's go into the first part, the first point in the agenda, the DACH region, cultural overview. Thomas, can I ask you to share more information with our audience? Imagine if they ask you the question, so what does it mean, the DACH region? What the DACH region is? Could you please explain in your words?
Yeah, so the DACH region essentially refers to three Central European countries. So the first is Germany, then Austria, and then Switzerland. The DACH is really the letters, so the abbreviated letters that's used for these countries. So D, A, and then CH.
Absolutely, absolutely. And usually people refer to that as Central Europe, right? And usually they categorize that like that. Is this true that it's a region, DACH region, where people, they have advanced English, like most of them by default, right? So the benchmark is high and the communication tends to be very low context. Is that true based on your experience?
I think in my experience, yes. I'm speaking probably more so about Switzerland than Germany and Austria in my experience. But yes, generally, I think there's a high level of proficiency with English here.
Absolutely. I think we'll discuss that more in a minute. But just to give more context to our audience, in case you guys never attended any of our previous webinars before, where we compared low context and high context cultures, I want to give you a real quick, overview of what these cultures are, how they are different. And the thing is that there is actually pretty simple rule that in the world, every culture, it falls into either of the two categories, right? The high context culture and the low context culture. Both these cultures, they have unspoken rules and norms about how communication should be handled, right? Especially in the business setting. So today we'll be speaking about the business communication. And if you don't if you don't know how to communicate with a specific culture, it means that every interaction will be biased, probably, right? So there will be happen this cultural bias where you expect some people to communicate just like you tend to communicate, right? How you got used to communicating. And usually it causes some miscommunication, especially if there are multiple cultures in the same team. So probably nothing good's gonna happen. And that is why it's very important to keep in mind low context and high context cultures. Now, when you see this table, you can just analyze that and think, if you come from, let's say, Ukraine, is this low context or high context culture? For example, Thomas, I know that you are originally from Ireland. So is Ireland considered to be low context or high context culture?
I think it depends maybe on who you ask, just a little bit, Julia. But I think we're probably known for maybe being a little bit more high context.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Which means that you have this mixed experience, right? Being from high context culture and now working with low context culture. That is why it's super important and, to know about these differences and to keep them in mind. And this is our plan for today. So let's discuss the question that I prepared here today. When you just came from Ireland to Switzerland, probably for work, right? Again, for business setting. Did you experience any culture shock the very first day you met your colleagues?
It's quite a good question. So when I moved here, I was in an international team, right? So I think in work, I don't think there was as much of a culture shock. But I think maybe outside there definitely was. What I would say, like a few things that I kind of learned along the way, especially coming from Ireland, where it's a little bit more of a high context culture, as you said, is first of all, breathe. Adapting takes a little bit of time. It was a bit of a shock when I was receiving kind of quite direct messages. So I have a very, very good example. And unfortunately, it's not the best example. It doesn't show me in a good light, but I got a train ticket one time because I bought the wrong train ticket. So it's not that I didn't buy one, I just purchased the incorrect one. And the ticket person who stopped me was extremely direct in their communication. They showed absolutely no mercy to me or to the story that I was telling them. And this genuinely was quite a shock. Because I thought to myself, if I was at home, I think maybe they would be a little bit more understanding. Whereas here was very direct. You broke the rules. This is the consequences, and that's it. There's no chit chat about it. So I thought I would share that story because it was quite funny.
Awesome.
The other
And
things,
yeah, I'm curious, how did you adjust finally? How much time did it take you to adjust to this environment?
yeah.
Because and it's just like real life situation. So how did you feel about that?
I think it did take a little bit of time, so I can't put an exact number on it, but definitely about 3 to 4 months before I really sort of started to get used to it. Some useful things I learned along the way was try not to take it personally. I think as an Irish person, sometimes the way that we embrace each other and communicate with each other is it's in a very warm sort of way, but when you're receiving these sort of direct messages, it doesn't have the same feeling. So but it's not meant in that way, and that's always the key here is you have to remember how is it intended to come across. So I'm trying to take it personally. It's part of the culture. It's not necessarily anything to do with you. Embrace it
Mm-hmm.
as much as you can, and where possible also try and be direct in your communications. It will make things a little bit easier for others within the same culture. I didn't get this right on the first go, just to be clear. So a little bit of trial and error, but I did get there eventually. And I'd say then over time, I think my own style actually changed. So overall, this has had quite a positive impact on me and my own approach. I wouldn't say I'm as direct as, for example, a Swiss person, but probably I'm a little bit more direct now in my style of communication versus a few years ago when I lived in Ireland.
Absolutely. So they say when in Rome, do as Romans do, right? That's the tip. Once you join this international company or a team, or for example, the company, right, the local company in Germany, for example, of course,
Yeah.
the soft skill of being adaptable and flexible, right? This is something that you need to work on. Definitely. Okay, Thomas, thanks for sharing. That was an interesting story. I quickly want to mention a very useful resource that we can't stop recommending to everyone, and this is a must book to read for anyone actually who is interested in cross-cultural communication, either for again life or for work and career. So the book is called The Culture Map, and I believe there is no alternative to this book, even at the moment. So because it shows these 8 culture scales, you will be able to understand other people. You will be able to understand how to avoid conflicts and understand why this cross-cultural communication conflicts actually happen. So that is why we even got inspired by this book, and we used it in our English for AT communication course, one of our flagship courses and most loved courses among our audience, because we took some real world examples and scenarios from this book, and it helps our students really understand, the situation, the story behind others people's behavior, their actions and steps. So feel free to, to screenshot it or just remember the name of the book, because this is a fantastic resource that you may want to read this weekend. Okay, and we are going on to this little fun activity. Thomas, I prepared some series of questions for you because we really want to hear your experience, to hear from you as from the person who is in that cultural environment in the DACH region specifically. So there's the very first question. Please answer whether you should or shouldn't do the following, right, in the DACH context. So do or don't. Make small talk that lasts over 5 minutes with people from the DACH region before a meeting. Is this a regular practice or not?
I feel like I'm being put on the spot just a little bit here, Julia, so I want to be careful at what I say. My answer isn't as straightforward as a do or don't, so apologies that I can't give a direct answer on this. I think it depends a little bit on the people that you work with. Also, how well you know them, what's your relationship to them, etc. If it's maybe somebody that you just met or maybe a recent colleague, it depends, right? I think what my own experience that I found here is that it can sometimes take some people a little bit more time to get to know you. There isn't this immediate um, how would I say, connection, and maybe that you have in conversation. So to this answer, I would say with people maybe that you don't know so well, maybe talk a little bit, not too long, and maybe for others that you know a little bit more, if you know that they feel comfortable with this, then I think it's
Nice.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's fine. It's fine that you cannot just give the strict answer. But I'm just curious because I come from Ukraine. This is Eastern European countries, right? And I often hear that from our students, and again, oftentimes from managers, they require and request this team training because they want to teach their employees to make small talk, to start this meeting on the positive note, something that they don't do actually here in real life, with their friends in their own language. And it feels not sincere, not authentic to them. They better just, start the meeting, say hi, and get started, like get down to business. So imagine you have this meeting with someone from the high context culture. Is it important to adapt, or would you make small talk with them? Would you ask them about weather, I don't know, some sport, some situation, some holidays happening at the moment? Or would you, as someone who represents the, all context culture, would you just skip this part?
So sorry, just to understand the question. So you're saying if for example, I went on to a meeting, let's say a virtual meeting with some people from Ireland, some colleagues from
Yes.
Ireland, right? So that's a good example. I think in this case, I probably would adapt a little bit to that and be maybe doing a little bit more small talk. Irish people are very fond of the weather. Also, if you look at my LinkedIn, I have quite a number of posts
Yeah.
which just talk about the weather and different experiences that I've had. So I think yes, for sure, it would be a lot more common for folks that maybe are from a low context culture. So within Switzerland, I think I kind of pick and choose the right moments. I wouldn't say I do it in all cases. It's more a case of knowing the people that you're meeting and maybe what their preferences are, and I adapt a little bit to this, whilst also being, I suppose, authentic to myself.
Wow, we just revealed that there is no secret pill. Like you need to be adaptable. You still need to work on that, the way how to interact with other people. So probably sometimes it's not enough to say like, so this person is from a low context culture, right? So they don't want
Yeah.
to small talk that much. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. One more question before we go forward. Do or don't, or shouldn't, be a few minutes late to a meeting without giving a heads up? Before you answer, I want to give you the, to understand, to give you some context to that. Just because I run meetings every day with international audience, with people from different cultures, I noticed that high context cultures, they tend to be a few minutes late to a meeting. And it's not because they are not punctual, it's just a part of their culture. I don't want to email them immediately and say, hey, it's just like 1 minute and I'm waiting for you for 1 minute. Where are you? No, I understand that it's fine. They probably need around 5 minutes, usually no more, to join the meeting. So, what about you? What about the DACH region? What about these countries? Is it okay to be late to a meeting?
I would say don't. I think it's always good to give a heads up. And also I'd say like regardless of the whether it's a low context or high context culture, definitely good to give a heads up anyway. It's a courtesy. There is maybe one point I'll make, Julia, which is, and the Irish unfortunately don't have a very good name for themselves on this. We are known for being fashionably late. So I'll give you a good example. When I used to meet my friends, let's say we were going to the bar to watch a game or something. If they said, "I'll see you there at 7," I I would expect them at 7:30, maybe, or something like this. Whereas the culture here is totally different. If you say you're meeting at such and such a time, it's super precise. So being late is less common in Switzerland for sure.
Absolutely. This is what we teach our students when dealing with the Central Europe or again with the DACH region as we're discussing today. these people are always very punctual. Just like, to be honest, in Eastern Europe, like us Ukrainians as well, I think we are really punctual. And this is a great thing to remember and keep in mind if you guys want to have business with someone from Central Europe, right? If this is your potential client or just like a client, or you are a job candidate and you come to a job interview, never be late to the meeting. Right. Okay, that's interesting, Thomas. I like your real cases, real stories. Now let's go to the next section, which is the most popular thing to discuss is how to give feedback, how to deal with feedback, how to manage feedback. Because again, there are direct and indirect approaches. Some people, they think, they get defensive when dealing with feedback. They cannot embrace feedback. Maybe that's because, again, it's miscommunication, cross-cultural miscommunication. They expect a different kind of feedback from someone who is not from the same culture, right, as they come from. And that is why I have this fantastic tweet. Take a look at it and share your thoughts. So what do you think about this? Do you think it's true, especially about the Germans quote, compared with the Brits and Americans? What would you comment on? Right. So, yeah, take a look at it. As you can see, the Central Europe countries, again, all context cultures, right? They tend to give feedback in a very direct, concise way, right, to the point. While, for example, Americans, right, they really love the sandwich method. When they start with something positive, then they insert something negative inside, and then they finish on a positive note, like always. Every time you join a workshop on how to give feedback led by an American expert, they will always mention this tip, right? But what about Germans, or what about Switzerland or Austria? What do you think? Thomas, I think you are on mute, or
Sorry, I wasn't sure if this was a question for me or for the
oh yeah,
chat.
sure,
So
sure.
apologies. I, my experience has definitely been more in line with what it says here. So I think when you say something like your work is deeply flawed because of X, I think that I would say is super direct. And you're really cutting to the chase, so to speak. So my experience hasn't been. I don't think it goes to that extreme, but I have seen this also myself. Um, I also agree. I think the kind of the more British way um, is to be perhaps a bit more polite. So the way the person says, "Pardon my skepticism," although it's been a while since I've heard that particular phrase, but I think they will be maybe a little bit more polite, but still, drill home the feedback. And the same also with regards to maybe folks that I've worked with from the States, and they will try and sandwich it together in a nicer way. So they will be direct, but they will also call out some positive things that they saw and mix it in with maybe things that could be a little bit better. So I'm not sure where you got this tweet from, Julia, but yeah, I
I
would
should
have
ask
to.
my team. Yeah, we
Or who
also
found it?
included that tweet to the one of the courses, Power Skills for Tech course. This is
Yeah.
taken from there because it just it captures this difference, and it's just nice and true, absolutely true. As a team lead yourself, Thomas, how do you give feedback to your international team? Because let's say there are people from low context and high context cultures. How do you find this balance then?
Yeah, I think it's a very personal thing. My own style is actually not necessarily to look at it from a low context versus high context perspective, although I do take it into consideration, but it's more about getting to know the person and getting to know their own personal preferences. Just because somebody is from Switzerland or from Ireland, let's say, doesn't necessarily mean that they are, high context or low context. So, my advice is definitely to try and get to know the person as much as you can. Try and understand a little bit more about, what way do they like to receive feedback. So my time as a manager, I have actually asked this question to say, hey, what is your preference here? When is it that you'd like to hear it? How is it that you would like to hear it? Do you have any preferences around that? So So I think it's partly that, and then also take into consideration, if you are giving feedback, it's good to think, look, what is the goal here when you're giving this piece of feedback? What is the outcome that you're looking to get from it? I think those two things primarily should be guiding kind of the approach that you take to the person.
Absolutely right. I like the thing that you just shared, and it probably partially answers this question, like true or false. So I prepared this question for you. Is it true that people from the DACH region, they are focused on the negatives when given feedback? So it means they don't give positive feedback that much if we compare that with the previous tweet, right? As what Americans start with. So is this true or false based on your experience?
Again, I don't necessarily want to say this is kind of a right or wrong or true or false. I think in my experience, yes, I have seen maybe more they will focus a little bit on the negatives more so than the positives. So it's not to say that they don't give any positive feedback, but I think if you're to compare it to maybe the slide before, where they said an American is giving the positive feedback first. If you compare those two, then yes, they are focused a little bit more on the negative when giving the feedback.
Right. And I think I also have something to share. And this is a real screenshot from one of the emails that I received earlier. And let's take a look at this example feedback and see if it aligns with what we know about the DACH region. So if you just saw this email, would you understand that this feedback is typical of the DACH region? I mean, the email structure, the way person communicates with me, is this typical or not? Also, let's give the audience a chance to think, and it's interesting if you guys react and say how would you rewrite this feedback based on your culture, on your style of communication. Is this feedback, is this email very direct, is this polite email, or maybe it's rude? Maybe you can see that the person is just getting down to business immediately, or maybe everything is fine, it's just a clear and concise email. So, Thomas, what do you think? Is this feedback typical of the DACH region?
I actually have a quick question to maybe start off, Julia, which is this coming from a client of yours or something like that? What's the situation here?
Oh, right. The situation was with the documents. So we were dealing with some documents there, we were sending the documents to each other. And then the person said that their lead had another question, right? So something to discuss the document. And this is when I received this email.
Yeah, I mean, my impression is definitely it's very direct, so they get straight into it. So it's only after the first few words they immediately come in with the question. So yeah, but I think also it's always good to see the context sometimes. So usually this
Absolutely.
type of email, it's part of a chain of emails, right? So it wasn't just sent as a one-off. But in this case, yes, I would agree. It's quite direct.
Right. And I actually love that just because from the very beginning, I knew that this person comes from Germany and I would expect this style, like in which style these people, this person would communicate with me. So I didn't treat that as, people were rude with me, so they were impolite or something like that. This is just, the communication style. And once you adapt to that, once you are aware of the cross-cultural communication, so you just treat it as a work email, you answer better the same way, right? Quickly and concise, because this is what the person expects from you as well. And this is how you maintain this business communication across cultures. Okay, great. Thomas, I think we have some comments here in the chat. And Annie says that she likes the responses, that the answers that you share, and it's actually really nice to get such feedback. Thank you so much. And we are moving forward to this quick tip about how to ask for feedback, because embracing feedback, like accepting feedback is one thing, but what usually people ignore or skip, they skip the part of asking for feedback. And I often heard from our American clients and American students that the fact is, if someone doesn't ask them for feedback, again, they treat it as someone doesn't care about it. They don't care about the person's thoughts and opinions on work tasks, for example, on projects or things like that. So it's very important to ask for feedback. And the question is how you actually ask for feedback, because you need to be really specific when asking for feedback. Some general questions like, hey, do you like my presentation? Do you like this webinar? What do you think about this webinar? People will likely say, yeah, it's great, it's good, because like they wouldn't like to start with something negative. But instead, if you restructure your question and you say, which 2 or 3 things would you change or would you suggest, next time? And this is what makes this feedback session really quality, right? It's really productive because you'll really get the answers, the answers that you expected, something that will help you grow and improve. So this is a really nice tip that we love teaching our students, and I was happy to share it today. Are we ready to move on?
Julia, can I make one of the quick points just on this slide? So I agree as well. I think it's a great way of asking for feedback and kind of being a little bit more direct to the person. Something else also that can help is just to provide maybe a quick sentence on why you're asking the person for feedback. So what I found to be effective in some cases is to start off by saying, "Hi, I'm in the middle of doing X. I know you're experienced in this area. I really value your opinion or your input or something." Even for low context cultures, actually, this is quite a nice way to start it off, and really also shows them that you're not just reaching out sort of aimlessly. Really, you've come to them
Yes.
specifically because you value their opinion. It can help it, and obviously depends on the situation, but I think in most situations, this is actually quite helpful.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So that's why I had this question for you here. Is it important, or should you maybe be very specific and detailed when providing feedback to professionals from the DACH region? Or maybe should you use the sandwich method of giving feedback?
This is another good question. Again, the first thing I'd say is try to try to personalize it a little bit, so to the individual or to the situation. um I definitely know some people from the DACH region that prefer a little bit more of a soft approach, right? So it still is direct, but they would like a little bit of positivity first. But I know there's who kind of just want to get straight to the point. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. The sooner I know this, the sooner I'll be able to improve or correct. So I think what I'd say is it's good to be specific and detailed. Yes, but I would say that's for all the people, no matter what. But it also depends on the person that you're speaking to, and also what the aim of the feedback is. Just some things to keep in mind. Julia, are you still there? Okay, folks, it looks like we may have lost Julia. Just to mention, she did say that there was a power outage in Ukraine today, and therefore there might be some issues with this. But if we could just pause, maybe just for a minute or 2 minutes, I'm going to contact Julia and see. Yeah, I think, yeah, and I see someone saying we I think we lost her. It looks like we lost her. Um, let's just maybe hold on just for a couple of minutes. I'm going to try and contact Julia outside of the chat here. So please bear with us for 1 to 2 minutes, and we'll try to get her back. Hi, folks, and thanks for your patience on this. And again, sincerest apologies for the delays. It looks like there has been a power outage where Julia is. They've also lost an internet connection as well. She says she might be able to rejoin, and she's going to keep trying. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up the last few slides as regards the feedback, and then we'll go into a Q&A session if anyone has any questions. So I do have the slides here. Just bear with me, please, for one moment, and I will share my screen. Of course, this happens to me when I'm under pressure and I can't get my slides up. And please just bear with me for about half a minute. I'll get this up and running here. Oops. Can everyone see the slides? I'm just going to flick through to, let me see. Folks, I'm very, very sorry about this. For some reason, I cannot share my slides. I think it's because Julia owns this. Yes, yeah, I can see all the responses now. I think this is because Julia owns the meeting, unfortunately, so it looks like I can't share them. What I will do though is I will actually share just the last slide that we were going to go through. So it was another do or don't. And the question or the situation was avoid giving positive feedback and asking others to share feedback so as to not waste people's time. I'll maybe open this up to the comment section. What do people think here? Sorry, I'll just put this in the chat. Giving positive feedback. Not. Sorry, this is the situation here. So it says avoid giving positive feedback and asking others to share feedback so as to not waste people's time. What do we think? Is this a do or a don't, depending on whether it's high context or low context? I'll wait about 10 to 15 seconds for folks to write in the comments, and then I'll also share my own thoughts. Yeah. Okay. Don't. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. To tell we have personal biases as well. Okay. So I've got a couple of comments on this. I'm not so sure it's a straightforward like as a do or a don't. Avoid giving positive feedback. I think it depends a little bit on the individual. What's their style? What do they, what do they want in terms of receiving the feedback? I think I said a few minutes before, it's good to get to know the person as well as you can, and then try to determine what you think is the best approach. Some people may actually prefer if you start off things on a positive note and then move into giving more critical or critical feedback or developmental feedback. Sorry, Lee, you've asked if I can repeat the question. So The question is around a situation, so it's a do or don't. The situation is avoid giving positive feedback and asking others to share feedback so as to not waste people's time. Great. Okay. So this was the last slide in terms of giving feedback. And sorry once again that I can't share can't share the slides. What I wanted to do now is actually to move on to the Q&A. So yeah, I'd like to open up to questions. If you want to pop questions into the chats, I'm happy to answer them. It can be related to communications or anything else. As Julia said, I've got quite a lot of experience in the HR and recruitment field, so happy to answer any questions on those as well. So Pau commented here, so in the UK, the feedback and opinions are polite, but 80% sarcastic. That's an interesting observation. Can't say that that's been my experience as well, although I have experienced some sarcasm with the feedback. Although you've mentioned here, so it means just giving feedback without positive input. I think it depends. Yes, in some cases, a more direct approach is needed. Um, you know, I think maybe in a situation whereby it's a critical situation, so something drastically wrong has just happened or just taken place. Sometimes a more direct approach is needed. You need to be very direct and very specific as regards to what went wrong. But again, this depends on the situation. I'm only talking about extreme circumstances. So Sophia has commented here, what should not be discussed with people from the DACH region? Sophia, can I ask you to be a bit more specific here? Are you talking in terms of small talk? Are you talking in terms of feedback? And could you be a bit more specific? Sophia, while I'm waiting for your question or your answer, your next question, rather, I'm going to also answer Lee's question. So Lee has said, best way to network in Switzerland. LinkedIn isn't cutting it. This is not the first time I've heard this comment, Lee. In my experience, definitely anything that you can do live is much better. By that I mean, for example, going to events. There are a lot of networking events that take place in Zurich and across Switzerland. LinkedIn is actually a good place to learn about the different types of events. So I'd maybe recommend checking some of those out. I'm also happy to share some that I've attended in the past, if you'd like, maybe after this webinar takes place. And so simply speaking, as commented, I have a personal approach. It is important to keep expectations real by clarifying good and to improve areas. If, as you say, something has gone wrong, I think it has to be clear. Yeah, 100% agree. I think managing expectations is very important. And I think in a lot of cases, again, depends on the person a little bit here. But I think it's good to have a balance between, hey, here's what's working well, here's maybe some areas for development or areas for improvement. But also, as you say, if something has gone catastrophically wrong, which is rare, by the way, right? It's an extreme circumstance. A more direct approach is usually the best. So Ina's also comments, so it is no waste. Feedback is feedback. It is important to receive it. What kind of feedback it will be is another question. 100% agree, Ina. Although I will say that the delivery is important. And certainly in my experience as a manager as well, I found giving the feedback is important, but how the feedback is ultimately received and how it's interpreted is also just as important. But I totally agree with you. Giving the feedback is really, really important. So Sophia, so you said, I mean, during small talk, maybe there are some points that colleagues or clients from that region don't like about the conversation. Yeah, this is a bit of a tough one, right? When I talk about general things like, for example, the weather, It's rare that somebody doesn't connect with that. I think everyone has some sort of an opinion as regards the weather, so that's maybe a bit more of an easy one. Um, if I'm going into other areas, I think it does depend on the crowd and sort of the situation. I'll give you a really good example. So at the moment, the European Championships are taking place. I'm not a huge football fan, but I do watch a little bit of it in places. And there's Julia. Hi, Julia. Welcome
Hi there.
back.
Yes,
I,
thank you. I hope you guys can hear and see me now.
yes. Julia, I was just making just one last point because there's a question here from Sophia. Um, so sorry, Sophia, just to finish off here. One thing that I was doing in like some meetings and also, for example, at the lunch table was just asking if people are watching it. So I wasn't immediately going in and talking about it, but just trying to, test the water a little bit. And as soon as I figured out a few people are watching it, it then actually creates an opportunity for a little bit more small talk. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, they're just some ideas that I had. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thomas, thank you so much for supporting me and the audience. You guys were really supportive. So yes, you were right. The power outage happened here in Ukraine, in my area. But I really appreciate you waiting for me. And I'm super happy I was able to join back and to wrap up our meeting today. I wanted to finish on the note when we are going to give some best practices for communication in multinational teams, because if you have this multinational team, right, you need to, as you already understood, take into account all the things, how to give feedback, how to respond to feedback, right? And I have one tip for you, the final tip for today, and then we'll ask Thomas to do the same. This is how we exchange our tips and wrap up the webinar today. So my golden tip, the thumb rule, is the bottom line up front, right? Or in short, it's called bluff. So actually, what I mean by bluff is that this is a tip when communicating with all context cultures. When you want to communicate someone with Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the Netherlands, for example, always put the main idea first, the very first sentence. So the person hasn't even opened your email, but they exactly see what you actually mean, right? What is the something that you wanted to say, the main idea, the bottom line, right? As in this real screenshot, this is also our business communication, one of the emails that we received. And as you can see, after the first paragraph, then of course you can give more details and explain like what exactly you need from the person, right? What details you request. But the bottom line up front, it works perfect with all context cultures in all context processes. Thomas, do you agree with me? I suppose you are on mute. Right. I think I can ask you to unmute yourself. Yeah. Hope you can hear and
Sorry, I'm back now. Apologies. My I think my laptop just stalled for a moment. And yes, I think this has been my experience. Better to just be upfront in some situations. Again, I think it also depends a little bit on the person you're speaking to. If I know someone who's from Germany or Switzerland who maybe likes a little bit more of a soft approach, I think I'll factor this in, but I will try and use this as much as I can. The other thing I'll say is in situations that are very critical, where
yeah.
something is like catastrophically wrong, yes, this is a really good tool to use. It's really good to get to the point up front and then provide the context afterwards.
Absolutely. And just one final thing to recap the whole webinar, everything that we discussed today, is that I loved something, the rule from this book, The Culture Map. It says there is just one easy strategy to remember. It says that multicultural teams, they need all context processes. So Thomas, I have good news for you, right? The all context processes, they prove to be really effective, and they result, with good things because you're clear, you're concise, to the point. And if you deal with people from multiple cultures, it's better to stick to this all context process. That's my think and thought that I want everyone to remember and keep in mind as well. Absolutely. Right. Seems like we already had this Q&A session. We just, switched to the parts in our agenda. And thank you so much. Again, this is about being flexible and adaptable to our tough times sometimes. But I really appreciate you sorting these things out. And I really appreciate you guys waiting for me for this webinar to finish. So thank you so much. And on this end, if no one has any questions, I think we can wrap it up.
Julia, I think there was just one final question here from Paula, I think. Will we take this question?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So Paula said, I'm coming from Latin America and I consider our people to be very polite. How would we deal with some other cultures that may sound rude when getting feedback? Very interesting
Right. Let's
question.
let's imagine we have the session with someone from Latin America and from Switzerland, right?
Okay.
So probably Paula is asking about that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear your take on this as well, Julia. My own take would be, you know, it is really important, I think, at these times to really understand, you know, where is the boundary, right, between something that is considered direct and then something that is considered rude, right? So usually if something's rude, it's usually the tone or how something is said, right? And I think if obviously it depends on who I'm receiving, the feedback from. If I thought that it did sound rude and it did kind of cross that boundary, um, I would wait until the person is finished, right? So wait till they finish giving the feedback. Try to digest it as well. So try and kind of separate, okay, this is the tone that I've heard, but this is also the words that they've used to really make sure I understand it. And if I don't, go back and make sure that I understand where they're coming from and what exactly they're trying to get at. Um, and then if I really did feel that it's rude, I would usually inform the person maybe after the fact and maybe just say, hi, I'm just letting you know the way that this came across, it did sound a bit rude. I'm not sure. I'm sure that wasn't your intention. Wherever I felt it's maybe valuable just for you to know. But I really appreciate the feedback that you've given me.
Absolutely. I agree that having these one-on-one conversations probably is a great idea. But also this question, it just depends on who you are speaking to. If this is the person who you know, right? So you know that this person is from well-conscious cultures, from Central Europe. So they would probably always give you this kind of rude feedback. But it's not rude if they are not in a rush, when giving you feedback. It doesn't mean that they just want to finish this feedback quickly and run away. No, this is just their style of communication. And as well as you're aware of that, you would not consider this feedback as rude, right? It's just different cultures. But finding this balance, that's super important, I suppose.
And we have
Amazing.
more questions, Julia. Now I think a few more have come in. Do we have time for these?
I think we have around 5 minutes, and
5 minutes?
just because you guys were super kind to wait for me, of course, let's address more questions today. And I think we have one from Oksana. Oksana asks, what about reaching out to colleagues in their free time? It could be quite common in the US, which I agree 100%. But in Germany, right, this term is widely discussed even in a language course program, right? So, Thomas, do you know this word? Can you translate it for our audience? And how would you answer this question?
Yeah, very good. So Feierabend, and I have to say I'm not a German expert, a German language expert when I say this, but Feuer I think refers to like a holiday or vacation, and Abend is evening, so like it's basically after hours, right?
Yes.
And if anyone is more of an expert on German, please feel free to prove me wrong in the comments if I misunderstood. So Oksana, I think the first question I'd ask here is, what would you be reaching out about? So I don't want to assume maybe it's about work. Maybe are you talking about just casually reaching out to them? Maybe they are a friend from work. So what I'm trying to say is that the relationship to the person and the context, I think, is also important. For example, I had some friends at work that I hung out with outside of work, and therefore it was okay, I think, for us to maybe be communicating outside of work because we ultimately were hanging out outside of work. If it's a work colleague and it's on work terms, um, I think there's more boundaries, or I've definitely found this within Switzerland. There's more boundaries that at the end of the day, um, you know, there's sort of the end of the workday and kind of the beginning of your free time. So it's less common that I receive messages like this in the evening time or in my free time. Um, so yeah, I would maybe tailor to the person and to the relationship that you have with the person. I also would err on the side of caution generally and be respectful of certain boundaries. That would be my assumption.
Right, I agree with that. And I also read that in several books that it's important to respect boundaries, especially of the low context cultures. So this term exists and it's better to take it into account. And if you have this urgent work question, it's better, to think if it can wait until Monday, until the Monday meeting to discuss that. If this is, about reaching out to your colleague in their free time when they don't work, when they're on vacation, out of office, and then you have this urgent work idea. So it's better to, I suppose, it's better to put it until Monday or another work day. Good, cool. Right, Thomas. Let's finish with the final short question, and then because we respect everyone's time, we have to
Yeah,
put it, to wrap it up and maybe continue next time.
yeah.
Ina says that Ukrainians, again, all context culture, right? They highly value service. What is similarly important for Germans? Two, three characteristics. So it looks like Inna is asking us to compare Ukraine, right, with Germany. Um, Based on my experience, we are really similar when it comes to giving feedback, right? When it comes to coming on time to the work meeting, the way we structure our meetings with clients, the way we agree, the way we email, right? Again, the email structure, being to the point, using this bottom line approach. I think this is something similar. I don't have any team members, on my team. Just I manage an international team, but I don't have anyone from Central Europe. So I'm not sure if we have any other things that we share in common. Thomas, maybe you've ever worked with Ukrainians.
I actually have not directly anyway. But I think I would agree with everything you've just said there, Julia, especially around timing and efficiency. I think this is something quite to the core of Germans, and also a little bit in Switzerland. So a really good example. If a train is delayed in Switzerland for more than maybe 2 or 3 minutes, you already see a few like sighs or a few people, complaining or looking at the time. So being on time definitely, and being timely. Um, I think being direct in your communications. So I think maybe using the term less words is more in this case. So
Yes.
try and get to the point, and also just try to be helpful. I think that's also something else that I've found here.
I agree, right. That's interesting that sometimes we think we know everything about connecting with people from different nationalities because like we've been doing that for all our lives, right? Or for some years now. But it looks like sometimes we tend to ignore or forget the details and how a culture gap tends to influence our behavior and our things at work. That is why I'm so happy that we had a chance to discuss this topic today, cross-cultural communication. I really hope that it was useful for someone, that there were some, a few eye-openers for you guys. I hope that you found our answers also interesting and insightful and useful for you. So thank you everyone for your time. We really appreciate that. Thank you, Thomas. Thanks for joining us. We really love you joining our webinars from time to time. And that was a really great experience today. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well, Julia. And yeah, this was really enjoyable. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.